It got to the point where I think I was making liquid ecstasy, homebrew from the kitchen, paint stripper and soda crystals and little other things. And then it quickly came from that, just fucking paint stripper. I didn't get clean and sort myself out and then go on a journey into the business world and be successful and left it all behind, because that won't be true. That's bullshit. You know, I would make an amazing success of myself and then just get addicted to cocaine again. And it was only really being a father that was the final thing that kind of just like, this ain't for me anymore.
Everybody likes and loves a comeback story. My next guest, Gareth Jones, has hit the lowest of lows. He was homeless, addicted to drugs and drink, but he's proof that you can always bounce back. He's now the founder of a very successful brand called Honor. He's the creator of Genius Coffee. I've had the pleasure of testing out the product, tasting the product and talking to Gareth. He's got a wealth of knowledge about wellness, recovery and nutrition. His passion is to help people, and he also likes to help high performance individuals, including athletes and specifically fighters. Gareth is a great guy and I'm pretty sure you're going to get a lot of value from this particular episode. Be happy and never content. So I've got another week on my podcast, Stephen Sulley Study. Got a really, really cool guest in front of me. I've just been saying off air, I was listening to a podcast with this very man and I wasn't so aware about the background, about the adversity, about kind of hitting a rock bottom, I guess you could call it that, yeah. and bouncing back, and the way you talk and your mindset and your knowledge is very, very compelling. I also said next door in our studio, Woodbury House, that my mission is to become the best version of me, because when you become the best version of yourself, you become financially better, you have better relationships, you're more educated, everything is totally heightened. And I believe the conversation we're about to have is going to be, there's going to be some synergy there, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Gareth Jones, I don't even know how to kind of welcome you on the podcast, but I guess you are an entrepreneur that founded the brand, which is called Honor.
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, your background, how did it all start for you?
Well, I think the main way I introduce myself is I'm a kid from small town Wales, and like most people from that background, humble beginnings, I thought my life was going to probably end up in either jail, a factory, or the army. And my way out was rugby, was the way I thought I would transcend my roots. And I was fortunate enough to sign for 2 professional clubs and get out. And then, unfortunately, a serious injury stopped me at the very early part of my career. And everything from that point spun out of control. And it was probably not a huge amount of time before my rugby career had finished, and I was sleeping rough, sleeping on a park bench. And it just brought to the fore that from the age of 11, I've been hiding a dark secret that, you know, I had problems with drink back then. I've been taking prescription painkillers. I was addicted to those, addicted to other drugs, right from an early age. And I just hid it, you know. It was from an environment, men don't speak to men, they don't let people in, you don't tell people there was a problem. I had a little guidance, and I just found myself at rock bottom, probably at the age of 21. And, you know, from someone who'd put an awful lot of pressure on themselves right from an early age to get out, make something of themselves, be successful. I'm going to be rich, you know, you won't say this to me when I'm a millionaire, all this kind of thing. It's just like one morning to be down that park bench and an old guy to make his way over to me and just go, do you want to borrow a $5, son? You know, that was the be of the bang.
Right.
That was the be of the bang.
So a bit more about the darker times, because then it will set up the podcast and conversation for like what you're doing now and how you overcome it, etc. But talk to me about some of your toughest times. So the drinking, the prescription tablets or medication. Was there any drugs involved? Talk to me about when you was homeless.
Yeah. So I think thinking back, you know, it seems to be a very sudden thing. If I'm honest, I probably always had an addictive nature, addictive personality. Obviously, my sport was my way out. It was where I found my identity, that big person, that big character. I think with a lot of maybe there's synergies with people who you've interviewed in the past, where you have these big characters, but behind them, there's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. and then they express themselves in success or fighting or violence or, some degree of where someone can try and get a name. And as men, what we try and do is we try and show the world, and essentially we're trying to prove something to ourselves. So I think that's something I was doing, is that I was at war with the world, and I almost don't know who I was at war against sometimes. And I think drink and drugs played a part in that, because you don't care. Anyone who values themselves that much is going to be looking after themselves, is going to be gentle with themselves. And I just didn't give a fuck. I didn't care. I was at war. I was at war with myself. I was at war with the world. And I just had no fear, because what's going to happen to me? Being fearless sometimes isn't a great thing, because you disregard other things. So I think drink first started, I think I've said this before, I first got kicked out of school for drinking at 11 when I realised I had a problem. I was already drunk. So I was drinking in the morning, and I got kicked out of a Welsh class, which, considering how many consonants it is, takes some going. And I was just using drugs and drink all the way through school. Intermittently, it wasn't like a consistent theme. It was just, I would just go on just real wild points. But one thing that was consistent, I was always using opioids or prescription painkillers to cover up the pain. And I just felt like Ready Breck had that golden glow about me, because I just had so many injuries. I was playing all year round, and I was just using the drugs that I was getting from my friends. My friends were always older than me. And I was just getting, the same classification like heroin, just so I was numb to everything. And then at first, Stephen, I wanted to be numb to the pain so I could play. And then what I really was doing is I just wanted to be numb to the world. And then you're out of control. And then I would sort myself out, get a little bit of success. And then what my worst thing was is that I'm not sure how much I really believed in myself. I think it's an important thing. Like you've talked about being a mentor, which I think we really connect on. So one thing you've got to do is that I had no mentor. I had nothing to sort of I could go to. And therefore, I'm not sure how much I really believe. Even when I was successful, you think, okay, great, you're going to sign for this club. It's been a boyhood dream now. I found a way to fuck that up, even subconsciously. And I don't know it's because whether I believed or I didn't quite believe that I was worthy or due, or you tell yourself a tale of woe, so you almost live it out. I don't really know what was behind that. And I think that's why it's important there are mentors out there, and I'm really behind what you're trying to do and create, because as much as people, particularly with men, can connect with someone and lead a path and lead a positive path and lead a forge, then that's probably what's needed, as in that people can see a way out or a way through, or they can fuck up and not see it as like the end of the world, that you will come back. It's not the end of the world. You can't be that judgmental. These things happen. And it was always just like this tale of success, fuck up, success, fuck up, and just fueled with excess.
Yeah. It's a funny one, because I've interviewed so many athletes. I've interviewed a lot of people that have had drug problems, or people that have had abusive lifestyles. Not necessarily they're attacking people, but they just like, it's a bit like self-harm. Like they fall into these these ruts. But the same characteristics actually kind of fuck up your life can actually make you very, very successful. And
yeah, it's true.
The moment you have that switch and you turn it from a bad addiction to something which is a lot more positive, you can actually wildly turn your life around and actually become uber successful, not just financially, but with your network and who you become and your family, etc. And I noticed that kind of trait with a lot of really, really successful people. I mean, I don't know, who do I think of when I think of like that, like a Conor McGregor,
Yeah.
Very outspoken, hungry, it feel like anything that he would take on, he would become successful at. But then there was also like shots of him that when he made all this money from the Floyd Mayweather fight, for example, he went off the rails doing cocaine and drinking and going wild. And it was almost like the nature of the beast. There was that really, really dark place they can go in, but they can also come out and they can do something absolutely magical.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think so many like go-getters have that kind of gene or that kind of character trait?
Well, I think what it comes down to is that firstly, you have to be a certain kind of animal to have that. Fundamentally, one, which kind of, it's almost going to seem like I'm sort of negating myself here. To be the certain kind of animal that can have that self-belief, okay, to go, so we probably grew up from similar environments, right? So turn around and go, this ain't going to be fucking me. I'm not going to be like everyone else. I'm not going to go to jail. I'm not going to end up in a factory. I'm from an area where the only main job there is for a guy to do is work in a factory that makes the little blue blocks that end up in urinals. So that's why who's a working man in the town, because he has stains, blue dye in his hands, right? And you walk in a pub and you go, that's a working man right there. And then who's a bit dodgy doesn't have stains on their hands, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be a certain kind of character to show up and not be a sheep, to go, that's not going to be me. That's not going to be me. So you got to be, not off the bottle. I think as Marino said once, to not have that. So you kind of got to be in your... Now with that though, that self-belief can almost become, it won't happen to you. You can almost drink from the Kool-Aid too much. You can almost get lost in your own hype. And that was my thing. And this won't happen to me. And you have this self-destructive nature that comes in that, because what you're used to doing is going, fuck you, world. I'm going to fucking do this. Where what you realize is great success needs part of that, but it also needs collaboration or trust or relationships. Like you talked about network and relationships, and that's where your value is. So being siloed or being, just solitary figure, although it's cool and you think, I don't need to talk to anyone, I don't need any advice, that's going to lead ultimately at some point in pain, because you're not used to listening or letting people in. And the only people who are then hanging around with you are just kissing your ass or not telling you what you need to hear, which is you need to wise the fuck up.
Yeah.
So I think it's in the nature of the beast to be successful that you're going to look beyond these parameters. This ain't written for me. So the very person who thinks like that has got to be a trailblazer. But with that DNA comes from, we're already turning around and saying, these boundaries aren't for me. I'm beyond this. So that's great, but that's a scary animal, because it's almost saying, the laws of the jungle don't apply to me. The laws of the jungle don't apply. I'm different. So you've already taken that step inside of you. So now we've got a dangerous animal. So within this dangerous animal, it's usually talented or a larger-than-life character or whatever it may be. Can you put into that animal the usual things that other people can? So normal people don't have a relationship with drink and drugs that I had. It was just, one is too many, 1,000 isn't enough. It doesn't matter what age I was. As soon as I'd had a drink or as soon as I'd had drugs, it was not enough. I was one of those people who's like a drink on a Friday, I'd still be going Tuesday or Wednesday. And I was always the same. It just wasn't enough. It didn't, for some reason, fulfill me. It just never got to a point where I've had enough. I could not get enough in me. And I think that's part of the nature. I think maybe McGregor's a bit similar. And I think out of all, anyone who is an artist or a little bit different or willing to look at the world and go, I'm going to put my stamp on this place, you've got to value your view on things over than society's or what the crowd may think, right? Otherwise, you'd be the same as them. And once again, that can be a dangerous thing, because you're going to think, like most people don't, which is, I don't fucking care. These rules don't apply to me. So it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that's no bad thing, because all great artists were a little bit crazy. You got, like McGregor says, you got to be a little bit gone.
Yeah.
You got to be a little bit gone for this game. And there's loads of people out there that I'm sure me and you admire who had that streak in them. And why that is there, I don't know. But I think it's a necessary evil at times.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Was there any like moments where, because I think I listened to on the podcast, did I hear right that you were drinking even paint strip at one stage?
Yeah, so that came about in a funny way. So it got to the point where I think I was making liquid ecstasy, homebrew from the kitchen. I'm not sure I've shared this with anyone. So it got to the point where I think my nootropic skills were coming out a little bit early. And I think from the kitchen making homebrew was like, selling in the clubs, liquid ecstasy, breaking this. And it basically came down to the component parts were a paint stripper and soda crystals and little other things. And you cooked it for this long and so on and so forth. And then it quickly came from that, just fucking paint stripper. So I went from, my day would start with like scotch in a mug for some reason, because it was breakfast time. I was having it in a mug, and then scotch, and then a couple of tramadol, and then that was breakfast at one point. And then it just went from there, just straight down like fucking paint stripper mixed with all bits and just pretty hard drug use, And if I'm honest, I didn't get clean and sort myself out and then go on a journey into the business world and be successful and left it all behind, because that won't be true. That's bullshit. I had peaks, troughs, fell off the wagon, all the way through that. I would make an amazing success of myself and then just get addicted to cocaine again, sort myself out, go on a high for a few years, get addicted to alcohol or other drugs again. And I was kind of like that for a long time until Emily came along. And it was only really being a father that was the final thing that kind of just like, this ain't for me anymore. This ain't for me anymore. This is pitiful. And I think it was because my own father's alcoholism had probably been a big driver why I was an alcoholic. The least thing I wanted my daughter was to think that of me. That just wasn't for me, So I would never, if it was left to me and it was only me on this planet, I probably would have carried on like that before I'd seen a coffin. I just know it, And when my daughter came along, it was just like, this is not written for her. I would never do it for myself. My own professional career or being a sportsman or something wasn't worth enough for me to sort myself out. Otherwise, as much as I tell her, well, I was injured and this, that and the other, I'd have sorted myself out. I'd have done it. But I wasn't enough for myself. That's just that's just laying it on the line. I wasn't enough for myself. My view of myself, because you can only perform in this life up to your self-realization, your self-image, right? Psycho-cybernetics, Maxwell Marx.
Dr. Maxwell Maltz, yeah.
What a great book, mate. That was the first one that started it for me.
Yeah.
And it was so important how self-image was. This should teach you shit in school, man. So your view of yourself, you will only perform in the world congruent to that. And for some reason, that just lit off a whole load of fucking fires in me that then took off. But that was so true. But, get back to my point. My self-image wasn't, you're not worth doing this for, Gareth. But my daughter was. And that was probably the turning point of like getting on the straight and narrow and staying on the straight and narrow for a consistent period of time. And, it's such an important thing why self-image and people to be secure about their self-image and building confident kids and building confident people congruent with their self-image and not try and get, I don't mean people to be perfect or not to do this thing now where you can't have competition in schools or loss or winning and all that bollocks, right? That's what a lot of shit. Getting people to be bulletproof is getting them to be resilient. So they accept people as they are. Like Kavanagh says, win or learn. So being bulletproof is about being happy and congruent with whatever, anything's thrown at me. But to do so, you've got to have a fairly solid self-image to do that. I'm okay, whatever gets thrown at me. And I think deep down I just thought, I'm not worthwhile. I'm not worth enough. I'm a fuck up for some reason. So I'm just going to skate the thin ice.
Yeah.
I'm going to skate the thin ice.
Yeah. It's like the psychology of, and I'm talking about a pool of people, again, which are not all of them. I'm not saying every single person is the same, but the Conor McGregors or the big high-flying entrepreneurs who seem like they've got everything, they have these massive moments and it's almost like self-inflicted crashes, and it's almost like they're trying to chase another high, and that's why they do turn to the drugs, or they might have a beautiful family, but then they suddenly go off with 10 different women and do something crazy there. And it's not because they're not satisfied or happy with what they've achieved. It's just that they're looking for the next high, even if the next high means it's going to be detrimental to their lifestyle or even to their health. And that's why you see it. Yeah. Well, that's my interpretation of it. Yeah. These are not necessarily bad people, but you know, they've made $1 billion, sold a company, floated it on the stock exchange, etc. They appear to have the life, everything. They've got the helicopter, they've got the yacht, they've got the jet, they've got the big house, they've got the Lamborghini, the Ferrari, they've got all the watches, they've got the lovely wife, they've got the lovely kids, but then they go and do something mad. Yeah. And you think, why have they done that? Yeah. And it really is about getting their next fix or next high from life.
Because we're human. At the end of the day, the reason they've done that is because we're fucking human beings. And at the end of the day, is what we need to do is, we're no one to judge anyone. I'm no one to judge anyone. What they need is compassion. But what it does show you is that success is not what we think it is, right? And those stories are introductions to that being truth. You know, that's wisdom right there. That, you know, success does not lie at those things. So contentment and peace has to come at some other level. So what we should do is rather than judge those people, look at that fucking dickhead. He's got everything in the world. Why does he not do that, right? That's what we all do, don't we? We all see that and we feel it's our place to comment. Whereas true wisdom is to see that and go, well, that ain't the fucking answer then, is it? That ain't the answer, because that's another fucking person that's done that, the same thing as everyone else does. So contentment or peace or happiness or true success cannot be in those things, because it's just another fucking story where someone's done that. So it's more, the question isn't, why is he a dickhead? The question is, well, what's the answer then? That's what we should be asking ourselves. We know that's not the answer because it's another guy doing that. So what is then? And that's what we don't do, is we don't ask that question. We go, let me fucking judge him. Let me fucking judge him, which is not what we should be doing. We should be going, ain't really any of my fucking business because I'm not perfect. But what it does tell me is another yacht is not the answer to being peaceful, to having contentment, to being happy. It doesn't lie there. It does not lie in things. It does not lie in another success stories. There will never be enough medals. There'll never be enough medals for the people who want to win medals. There won't. It does not lie there. So I think that's the story from those tales. Yeah. I think as soon as you sit in judgment of anyone or others, you're fucked anyway. You're almost as guilty as by association. And I think that's the danger. Yeah. You know, it's a slippery slope to go, look at that fuck up over there. Says the fuck up. You know? Yeah,
very true.
And I think, but also, it depends what we call success as well. So therefore, there is a danger that because someone has been successful in business, that they are success, as in we use the word blanket, a success. I think for me, that's too narrow. What it does is it shows that someone has bought something and sold it for more than it was worth to fulfill a profit on a scale that is billions and millions. And they are worth this in that game of business that they play, right? Whether they are success, because we interchange success and happiness, you know? So we're once again putting a label on it that isn't quite true. So what they've done is, in the game of business, they have, quote unquote, been successful, right? Whether they are a success, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? We kind of interchange the two with society. What we do now is go, right, this guy is a success, as in that's a blanket term that we can apply to him. No, it's not. In the game of business, the guy who's made a profit on this scale, right? Yes, there are lessons that we can learn from the game of business, okay? Now, whether he's got a panacea of all the ills of the world, of why he'll never fuck up again or never be successful, no, because it doesn't work that way. Does that make sense?
It does. So, like, listening to a lot of let's call it self-help gurus or reading from great authors or being around successful people, there's always like cliche sayings that come up and we hear them, and it's only as you go through your own life does one or two of them suddenly start making sense.
Yeah.
And one of them that I'm referring to, which is attached to what you were just saying, is success is not a destination, it's a journey. Now, don't get me wrong, if you wanted to sell a company for $1 billion and you sold it for $1 billion, I get that's kind of the destination, but what I'm talking about is your own personal journey. And I've interviewed quite a lot of people. One of the individuals that I really admired who gave me a life lesson was a guy called Tim Lovejoy, who's on Sunday Brunch. He was on Soccer AM, and he's a really, really, really cool guy. Yeah. I like him as well because he's a Chelsea fan, because I'm a Chelsea fan.
Yeah, he's funny. Yeah, I like him.
And he said to me, in order to be fulfilled in your life, you need 3 things. I said, okay. He said, number 1, something that is going to make you money or financially better off than you are right now. Money's not the root of all happiness, but what it does give you is choices. And I don't care who you are. It's better to have choices than not have choices. You know, if you were to ask someone, do you feel like you've got more choices, a guy on the yacht or a guy on the bench, it's quite clear they're going to say, I think I've got more choices. Therefore, it's part of the happiness journey. So that's number 1. Number 2, something that stimulates you, your creativity. And number 3, something that gets you fit, healthy, and your general well-being. He said, if you continue practicing those 3 things, you're going to have a pretty balanced life. And I thought, that actually makes a lot of fucking sense. Yeah. It really does. So I feel like in business, that was stimulating, you know, it's almost like driving towards or chasing, not chasing the money, it's the wrong word, but the psychology is keeping evolving, you know, make more money. And the way you make more money is giving more value to your audience, to your clients, and to your customers. Yeah. And the second thing is boxing. Byproduct of boxing is nutrition, recovery, sports therapy, you know, fit, you know, and when I do sparring, I get like loads of endorphin from hitting, pulling off a shot, or getting away from a shot, or actually sometimes getting clumped and, you know, realizing I'm still human. But the thing that I was lacking, I think, up until when he told me, and I was actually doing it, but I didn't really recognize it, was like the creative part. I wasn't a music star. I wasn't going to be a professional boxer, and I wasn't going to be a painter where I was going to go out there and start stimulating my creativity. Yeah. But what I've realized now that gives me a lot of fulfillment is actually this podcast. Yeah. Having conversations is my art. Yeah. And I didn't really class it as that. And now I really feel, look, there could be a roadblock in the future. There could be a challenge or something that I stumble over. And I know I'm not the perfect human being, because I have fucked up plenty of times in my life. But right now, I do honestly feel that fulfillment. I've got the money thing, not on lock, but it's going in the right direction. And that's what I want. I feel like, you know, competing boxing. Listen, I didn't win my last fight, but I still competed at 36. I feel like I still can give something to the sport. Yeah. And then I'm having great conversations with people like you, Gareth, and other entrepreneurs and athletes and high profile people, and it's just great. I just feel good about it. And I think, going off of what you said there, if you focus just on one thing, like I interviewed someone else before, I said some people get so obsessed with fitness, then they forget about finances. So they're really fit, but they're broke and they're depressed. Someone's really, really, really wealthy, but they're fat as hell, and they've got heart problems, and they're not happy. None of them are happy. So if you can get this kind of balance right, that's the art of fulfilled journey towards success, which you're never going to get to, but you're always going to evolve to get there, if that makes sense.
Well, it's a very wise thing that you said before, which is like people talk about fixed destinations, right? And we aren't. The only time there's a fixed destination, mate, is when we're fucking dead. And I know we all know that, but none of us act like that, because what we want to do is, I want to get to a point where I'm safe, or I want to get to a point where I'm happy. It's always moving. What I want to do is get to places where wherever I'm at that moment in time, I'm comfortable with what I am. That's what true peace and happiness is. But a lot of that comes from purpose. So what you've done is you've come out and did I set up this business to make 100 million and get some medals? Or did I come into this to create some purpose and to scratch an itch? So you're driven very much by purpose, right? You're obviously, clearly very astute in a business sense, right? You've only got to talk to you for 5 minutes. You know what the fuck's up. But also, from when you describe your passion, right? I truly believe you'd be doing this if this wasn't a quid in it for you. Because when I spoke to you before, it's about mentorship. I want to set a course. You are driven by purpose. Now, all the value you create in this world will show up in pounds and pence for yourself and your business. And what you've got to be doing, you've got to be driven by some kind of value that you give, because ultimately, if it's medals, it won't be enough. Value is rewarding. What you're doing here is rewarding. And also, you said a very, very interesting thing about creativity. We are creative beasts, we're creative natures. One of the things for men is we don't sort of fall into creative things naturally in that way. And that is a really important thing, to being mentally healthy, mentally fulfilled, mentally satisfied, scratching that itch of being creative in which any way it is. It's so important for the brain. And I think you're absolutely right. It is a balance between fitness, mental health, security. I mean, you could have nailed it more when you said about, look, you can say what you like about fucking money. It gives me choices. And it's true. It does. There's nothing noble about not having choices, because that would be bullshit. But likewise, having a goal that is unchaseable at some point is going to lead to unhappiness. But the value you create for the business will ultimately be a reflection of the value you've created for the world, won't it?
Definitely. And just to the last point of like my own personal journey, I've either recognised that I release a podcast a week, and I've been doing that nearly for 4 years, and I've never failed on that mission, on that promise. And what I typically do is I will record a load and get like 8, 9 in the bank. So I've got like 2 months, 3 months worth of podcasts ready to go. And then I also repurpose, thanks to the team here, a lot of the content. But if I haven't actually physically recorded a podcast or two in that week just to bank, I literally get to the end of the week and feel like there's an empty feeling. Like even my content's coming out. Yeah. I feel like, because I haven't had that real in-depth conversation with somebody, I do feel like, I'm never going to use the word depressed, but there is that tiny thing that it's almost like I'm empty here. And I know, contrary to that, the moment we finish this conversation, and I know it's a good one so far, and it's going to be even better by the time we're finished, I could jump on the phone and raise money from a deal because I feel so good. Yeah. And I'm like, right, you should look at this next opportunity because X, Y, Z. And I'm saying the same thing as I would have said 24 hours ago, but because I feel pumped, that comes across over the telephone, or comes across over to somebody, comes into the studio, they end up buying. And it gives you that fulfillment. And it's the same thing if I don't train. If I don't train for a few days, I'm like, I'm empty. And it's like I'm promoting the same thing, and I don't have that same tenacity in my voice. Yeah. But the moment I train, like tomorrow is my favourite day because I spar in the morning. I spar some of the pros, some of the guys on the Queensberry League, and I might bash someone up or I might get bashed up. And either way, I come into the day and I'm like, right, let's have it. Yeah. Like, and I'm there. And I feel so fulfilled in that morning that everything later on in the day becomes absolutely great. Challenges I push away. I convert sales. I meet great people. It's just such a mad thing. The moment you get the fulfillment from different aspects of your life, then another element of your life becomes a lot more heightened. There's a lot more weight.
Of course. So from a biohacker's perspective, let me explain what's happening there, right? So that's a concept of neuroplasticity, right? To give you the science of what's going on. So what people don't understand is that your brain and my brain will be different by the time we leave this conversation. And that's why getting together and having real conversations with people is so important. And that's why everyone was so goose during COVID, because people stopped having real conversations, and it's really, really important. That's what's happening there. The challenges in the brain and what's going on, the creative process that's going on, you're feeding that brain. And because you're feeding it, it's changing. And this is only a new part of neuroscience that's about in the last 5 years. Because what used to happen is, people used to believe is that your brain was your brain, and then from the age of 18, it was declining. And two things have happened. Neuroplasticity, which is the brain will change and grow whatever age you are, as long as you do the right things with it, the right stimulus, which is what you're doing. And then also neurogenesis, which is the growth of new brain cells. So what you're doing from a behavior perspective is almost changing your brain because of the conversations that you're having, which is why your journey to devour self-help books, podcasts, change, make a difference. It's almost like once you start and you keep going, it's endless. The limitation, or the possibilities are endless once you start that journey. Because you will see almost the information that you process now and how you go about your life now is almost, I bet you it's different. I bet you assimilate information, size up opportunities. I bet your brain's working quicker than when you started the podcast. That stimulus is a really important part for us as humans to get our maximum full potential. Challenging it like you do from a physical aspect. Physically, I'm fucked to take the world on now because you are changed. We accept it. If I'm going to grow physically, am I going to have to do more sets, reps, longer, spar harder than I did the week before, right? And that's how I progress physically, right? But because we're not in our heads much or we don't know as much about it, we don't realise how important it is that I can make a stronger, physically almost stronger brain or a high-firing brain the more challenges I give it. This is why challenges, failures, testing yourself are so important. Puzzles, the willingness of, I'm a great believer, Stephen, that successful people just stay with problems longer. And then because that has built up, but it's not something that happens immediately. It's something that happens over time. They're used to just going, oh, this is not going for me right now. And they're so used to just stay with it, just stay with it, just stay with it. And they build. Now, yes, you are building internal character, but you are also building the difference in the way that your brain fires. You're building greater neuroplasticity. That can only be a great thing. You're only going to perform as much as your self-image we talk, the capabilities of your brain, and also your health, which is, why that's integral to a part of it. Your health is so important to how you feel. The body leads the brain. Your machine will make you. You want to do everything you can from a physical aspect to take your brain where you want. You can't leave it to your fucking brain because that voice in your head isn't even fucking you. It's not even you. You fucking knobhead, what have you done that for? And people go, oh, I'm telling myself this. No, that's not you. And we all accept these doubts and worries and things that came as, we think that's our brain and our mind speaking to ourselves. Oh, well, it's like, who the fuck's that? The best thing you can learn is that pattern interrupt. And it's like that power of now, isn't it, with Eckhart Tolle? It's like what you call the watcher. You have to be the watcher. Oh, there he is again. There you go. There's you telling you can't spar that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it happens so immediate. And that's why the body is so important, because the machinery will override it. That's how yoga and breathing and those things work. You can't beat software with software. It's far too clever, because what happens when you go, it's going to you, oh, you're going to get smashed up by that guy. You're putting on the gloves. You're going to get fucking smashed up here. And you go, and even if you're clever enough to go, oh, there you go. There's the doubter telling me that now. I've read a book on this. I'm not going to let him in. It'll then change on you and go, oh, are you all right though? Weren't you feeling a bit dick? It's so fucking clever. Now, that's where you can't fight software and other software. It'll just write another one for you. Endless, like Matrix. And that's where it's important for males to understand is what we're going to do is I've got to get into my breathing there. I've got to get into my breathing. I've got to start feeling the body. Can you feel the toes on the floor? Can you feel your hands? Get out of my head. Right, get me breathing. And get you breathing. And that machinery will slow everything down and you'll get out your head. And then, my advice is then get connected to your heart. Right, what you're about. Get into your heart. Right, there we go. You're like, I've seen fucking Sulley. All right, is he going to get it? He fucking is, yeah. And then all of a sudden we're fucking out of our heads and we can take on the world. And that's, that's knowing how to put that body together. Getting out of the mind, getting into the machine, getting into the body, getting into your heart, and then back into the head on your terms. On your terms. So then you're writing the software then. The fucking cunt's going to get it.
Yeah. It's like getting into a peak state. That's what they used to say when I got into sales. They said you need to have a routine of a champion, and there were certain things that you used to do, like your rituals in the morning. So mine's adapted and changed over time, but typically I will get up between 5 or 6 o'clock. Tomorrow will be 1 minute past 5 because I get to sparring for 6. Do my training, that's obviously part of it. doing ice cold baths. I'm in there for 3 minutes. The reason why 3 minutes is a boxing round. So in my head,
I like it. Yeah.
Get out of there, going into a hot shower. Then at the end of the hot shower, another minute of freezing cold, and it's that kind of stuff. And then I have my cold pressed juices, and I don't eat anything physical apart from juices until about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I feel like I've done a mini fast, and therefore I feel like I've achieved something, and I'm in my peak state by 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. I'm there, like I've trained, I'm in the zone. I feel like physically I've gone through stuff. I feel like I deserve something to eat. I feel like I can have great conversations and great meetings, and I feel like I could achieve a lot throughout the day. What I love about talking to you and listening to some of our podcast interviews you've done, it seems like you've got a wealth of knowledge to do with your sector. Obviously, you being the founder of Honor, but so much more. You spoke about lion's mane. You spoke about biohacking. You spoke about food hacking. You spoke about so many different things. So, number one, where did this wealth of information come from? Why was you attracted to it in the first place? Is it because of, the kind of let's call it self-abuse with the drink, the drugs, and also being homeless, etc. And I'm a firm believer, going on my own journey, that what you consume, certainly as far as nutrition's concerned, it has a massive impact on the way you outlook life. Yeah. For example, and also the way you act. I don't want to call out my family members here, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I was away on the weekend, and my son, and I'm not going to say, I'm the best father and therefore my son's the best, but my son's got into a routine. He's 3 and a bit years of age, and after bath at 7 o'clock, he knows there's going to be a book or two for reading. Yep. He has a chat with me and his mum, brushes his teeth, have a kiss, then he goes to bed, and that's it. And he doesn't wake up until about 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. He doesn't eat chocolate. He doesn't eat ice cream. He doesn't eat any refined sugars, and he eats a relatively very clean diet. I am pescatarian. He's pescatarian as well, and he mostly eats fruit and veg. Okay. Yep. Then his cousin, and I'm sorry to say this if you're listening to it, he's eating a lot of Haribos, ice cream, and then by 10 o'clock at night, he's screaming he's intense. And I believe it's one, the kind of routine that you get into, but two, what you're consuming. One's going to make you nuts and then crash. Yeah, of course. And one of them's going to give you sustainable energy, therefore you think differently. So anyway, I went around the houses there to kind of ask you a question, but how much of what I just said resonates with you, and how much can you talk about, and how did you get into this space of that knowledge? So in two separate instances, you've described two very important things to help your listeners and your audience there, which is when you were describing yourself and you I want to be at peak state. Now, peak state is really important concept because it's almost hypnotherapy. So I'm very lucky to have Vinny Showman, who's a good friend of mine. He's a great hypnotherapist, and he's wonderful. And understanding altered states and hypnotherapy states is a very, very important concept if you're in sales or playing at peak or whatever. Because what you've done is followed a certain form of behaviours and rituals to get you ready, right? But when you were describing your son, going to bed, he's almost going through a certain routine. Now, all these things are really important to say to the mind and to the body. Are you ready? Because you're talking to the subconscious. And the subconscious is far more powerful than the conscious. So one of the things that I do when I'm working with fighters who've got a fight overseas or they're going to be on a different time zone, right? To give you an understanding how powerful this is, I get them to follow a certain set routine at home for about 6 weeks before they go and fight away. Now, the reason being is the subconscious brain needs to understand these rituals. But by the time they get to Vegas and they know it's to bed, the subconscious we're going to be able to soothe it. Because that's why you don't fall asleep properly when you're away from home, because your subconscious brain is so powerful, it's going, I'm in a different place here. So you think you're sleeping, but it's not. So that's how important those states are, or altered states are. How I got into it is because I accept and I recognise my failings I had all the talent in the world. I should have done whatever I did with my life. I didn't. My fault. And it's because I couldn't control my mind. End of. The only way I, in my head, can make it back is to help others achieve and optimize their lives, achieve their dream, play optimal. And that's from a personal level,
or a micro level I've described before as a macro level. For instance, if everybody is being successful or being optimal, right, and they're being successful, like you're an incredibly secure guy. Now you show up, you're successful, right? So no one's a threat to you anymore. We all show up differently when we're playing at optimal, don't we? And that's what we do. Now, on a national level, everyone's a threat. Or everyone's a threat when you're not playing at your best. You're judgmental, you're negative, you're depressed. So we can only connect better as individuals or as nations, or however you want to say, when we start to break down barriers of what we believe is possible and making it possible. So my passion was to help other people be successful through the application of either started off with nootropics, then biohacking, and then all the way through that world. And that's what my passion was. Not because I wanted to be a millionaire or a billionaire. I want to be successful. I'm a kid from a working class background like yourself. I want to be successful. I probably wouldn't buy a Lamborghini or that kind of thing because I'm the world's worst driver. That's not what success is for me, And it was, my passion is to help people do good in the world. I get the biggest kick out of them being successful. One of the greatest things with Honor was it was started with me and my daughter from my kitchen, and we released the Genius Coffee, and I remember getting our first letter of feedback through from a guy, like successful barrister in London, who had Parkinson's disease, and his carer had written to us saying, I don't know what you're putting in your coffee, but just fucking keep going, because the guy's stammers have stopped, he's now standing upright, his stammers stopped. I remember me and my daughter jumping up and down so happy. There's not an amount of money I'd ever earned in my career that was been worth that moment. It's just as simple as that. And to get back to your point about what you consume, yeah, of course, what you consume into your body will play out in your behaviour. This is where there needs to be more education, even just to the point of your gut. Your mental health, your brain function all starts in the gut. The microbiome of the gut is so important to mental health. So having a healthy gut, which you just cannot do if you are consuming bad food. So anyone that we start to work with in terms of raising a mental performance, we always look at trying to improve the gut, the working of the gut, try and improve leaky gut, try and get down inflammation. Inflammation from the gut will leave the gut and go into the brain cells. And obviously the toxins, the heavy metal, the amyloid plaques, these things are going to cause dementia, depression, Parkinson's disease, these kind of diseases. So we have to take that inflammation out of the body to make sure that we can restore the mind. You can't play at optimal if you've got a compromised brain. I mean, how I ended up in this world is, funnily enough, it was more through brain health that I started working with fighters than optimizing their performance. I got the guides. I would get these kind of strange text messages or calls in the middle of the night from like fighters or former fighters. Like, I've been told you're the guy to see about brain health and that kind of thing. And that's how it all started, because we were doing so much work with lion's mane, and I was speaking on podcasts about beta amyloid plaques, which is, we know that most people know that you get plaque on your teeth or plaque on your heart. What I didn't realise until I got into this world was you get plaque on your brain. These are beta amyloid plaques, and these fatty toxins that build up in your brain. Now, the reason we started to work with fighters or ex-military is because of the sport of boxing or fighting. These plaques will build up in your brain because of punches. And what I wanted to create is something is to get rid of these toxins from the brain, and this would stop the brain diseases that were happening with former fighters. Because what happens with former fighters or military is that people take this judgmental view is that, look, they can't handle life after they've given up their, hang up their gloves or given up their career or come back from the military. And it's not. It's because the brain is, because of what they've done with their career, it's physiologically different. So it's not that they're psychologically they can't handle life. It's physiologically the brain is damaged. So we've got to fix that before we can start trying to get through some kind of psychological trauma. And that's one of the big things. People have been in the military. If you're in a quarter mile of a bomb blast, the damage done to your brain is irreparable. Now, so how many people have been in that situation? So often these guys are seen as people who've like, they can't handle the real world, or they can't handle real life, and that's bullshit. Is that they need help to restore their brain on a physiological level to being able to be at optimum. So when they return to civilian life, that should be a prerequisite. Not, there we go, thanks for your 10 years, see you later. They fall into depression. They can't handle Civvy Street. A lot of bullshit.
I interviewed, I think I told you before, Trish Dixon,
Yeah.
boxing journalist and also an author. He wrote a book called Damaged, and,
Yeah.
it is basically about the boxers who have gone through head trauma because of the boxing. And what he points out is it's rarely to do with the fight. So most of the news reports written or spoke about and announced in a bad circumstances about normally the fight. So you got obviously Watson, who got brain damage. There's plenty of other fighters who've died off the back end of a fight because they got hit wrong, or they've hit the canvas wrong, or they haven't been treated quick enough. But actually, most of the fighters get their brain damage actually in the training, which is the sparring. Yeah, and it's like a bit of a catch-22 thing, even personally for me, because I love sparring. I understand as I grow older, I'm 36, how really long can I keep on getting in there with a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 25-year-old, 30-year-old who might be pro, amateur, trying to make her name for herself, very, very hungry, want to do some damage to their opponent, and I'm just doing it kind of to keep fit or occasionally do a little like a fight here and now. And I feel the most alive when I'm doing it, but I also understand that the more times doing it, it's a numbers game. The more closer I'm going to come to having real serious head damage, and I could even have it now. Who knows? So I want to know, how could I, if I do get seriously damaged, or even if I don't realise I am now, what I can do to kind of overcome long-term, life-changing injuries.
So hopefully I can help with this. So one of the best indicators about what we can do is, you may have seen the film Concussion, which is about the NFL and the doctor and so on and so
Will
forth.
Smith.
Yeah. So there was a lot of pressure on the NFL to look into the death of former players. One of the instances I've used before is a guy called Junior Seau, who was a Hall of Fame linebacker who earned $50 million in his career, but he died of depression because the trauma to his brain was so much it was just compromised. But what Junior Seau did is shoot himself through the heart so they could do a CT on his brain and look into the brain scan. He almost donated his brain in death to the NFL. So there's a doctor called Daniel Amen that was given $60 million to do a study. And what he came about with is there's probably 4 substances that could protect your brain. So I would recommend you taking these now, because these are going to take away some of the effects of the trauma of your sparring. And I agree with you. The sparring, not the fighting, is the real problem. The last thing you want to do with that kind of software is get punched in the head. However, we all enjoy it. So it is what it is. So if you are going to do it, you've got to do these things. So the 4 substances that Daniel Amen came across was very high strength fish oil, which is very high in DHA. And then it was acetylcarnitine, and then a choline source of alpha GPC, and also lion's mane. Okay. Now, this was a £60 million study by the best doctors in America, right? At this point, all those things, barring the fish oil, were in the coffee because of the research that I'd done when I first started the Genius Coffee, because the studies were out there about how lion's mane turned back the time on the brain by getting rid of the damaging plaques from the brain. And I think at this point there was 8 really decent medical studies, the first one being in 1991 in Japan, about how it was removing these toxins and improving the memory of Japanese students. And then the choline sources were starting to repair the mental energy in people's brains. So from menopause women to older people, they were starting to improve memory and brain function and the thickness of brain cells by giving them a really good choline source. And then you've also got the acetylcarnitine as well, which is, most dementia drugs will increase, let's say, the oil in your brain. And this is what's in the Genius coffee. So this acetyl-carnitine is what it does is it's essential for focus and concentration. And what this does is this depletes over time. So dementia drugs can't refuel it, they just stop the depletion. The way the Genius coffee does is it refuels it, it puts it in there, but we also add a club moss from China that stops, like an anti-dementia drug, that acetyl-carnitine burn through. So if you are sparring, you are fighting, you've got to make sure that you are taking lion's mane, fish oil, acetyl-carnitine, a really good choline source, because this will repair the energy in your brain, the thickness of your brain cells, and also the function. Because if you think about the brain cells, it's like, I don't know if you did physics in school, the thicker something is, the better it transmits. Yeah, something will transmit heat or electricity or anything, the thicker it is. And as we get older, or the more sparring you do, the thickness of those brain cells degrades. So we want to make sure those brain cell walls, for the good of our health, are thicker. And that's what these things help to do. So in terms of advising a boxer, those are always the 3 or 4 things that we always go to. Really high fish oil, less stress on the brain, less inflammation, less stress through the gut. Because also, the reason it's so important in fighters, if you think about how stressful a fight camp is, right? You've got all the stress of the fight. I mean, they're superhuman, these guys. And then you're getting punched. So it's no other sport. You're getting damaged on the way to the event. So you've got to put something in your brain that puts that back or takes care of that back. Not only because of, obviously we want to make sure that long-term brain health, but if you're getting ready for a fight plan or you're getting ready for a certain opponent, you've got to have your brain firing. So you're damaging your brain. We've got to get your brain back, but we also got to get it to be optimal again. And that's why it's almost more important that fighters take care of their brains, because they're damaging it and they need to be on point. I mean, this is one thing that's come back with, like, working with Liam, 8-time world champion. I'm watching him at the moment get younger through every sparring session, because he takes on every one of these points that he's only good as almost the age of his brain for a fighter, because he's so open to learning. And, you almost see him get faster, quicker, sharper, all the way through the fight camp at someone who's at the tail end of his career.
So your coffee here then, does it have lion's mane in it?
Yeah. So
what is lion's mane?
So lion's mane is a mushroom from Japan, and it's been used from thousands of years. And all our ingredients are all natural, and they're all from the 4 corners of the world. And one of the fascinating things for me was to put things together that ancient tribes had used to fortify themselves in either battle or medicine or health. So lion's mane is a medicinal mushroom from Japan that was found to remove the beta amyloid plaques and also improve memory in people who had dementia. And that the first study was really done in 1991. But then it's subsequently found out to be really useful so when you're learning a new skill, and this is, being a fighter, this is why it's really important. What we don't understand is there's a great book, I know you love your books, called The Talent Code, right? So we talked about how talented people have this thing in them before, like McGregor. And it's like, are they talented? Because McGregor will say himself, there's no such thing as talent, there's just hard work. Now, what the Talent Code does is it went and studied successful people, and it found out that people have this thing that people are born with talent. And they said it's bullshit, it's repetition. And it broke down how we learn and picked up new skills. Now, what happens is when you do a new skill like fighting or playing the piano, what happens is you have the neurons in your brain, and because it's new, the way your brain would look from the outsider is almost like you and I were walking through this grass, this high grass. You and I are forcing our way through it because we've never done that movement before, right? And the way that through repetition, what happens in the brain is we wrap this white fatty sheath around the axons and the dendrites, and it's called myelation. Now, over a period of time, if someone's got more skillful, that will look like, instead of it looking like a path, it'll look like a road, and then it will look like a motorway, right? And lion's mane helps that process. It creates that myelation. So by having lion's mane, you'll learn quicker. You can ingest something that will help you learn quicker. Okay, so it's a powerful thing. So it's really clever stuff, and that's how you learn new skills. So if I'm feeding my brain stuff that's going to help the myelation process, I'm helping my brain learn quicker, pick up new skills. So that's an important thing.
Yeah. So recommendation on how much of this coffee you should consume every single day?
Well, there's no toxicity. It's all natural. So 2 or 3 cups a day. It depends what your tolerance to caffeine is. This is really low in caffeine as well. So we use natural stimulants and natural products to make this give you that sort of edge. But it's an important thing. What we do is we boost dopamine. So you talk about your day, the cold showers and that kind of thing. What that does is that gives you a hit of dopamine. Now, dopamine and cortisol are going to be really important in the morning because that's your motivation molecule. So to get shit done, we've got to be motivated, right? And we put tyrosine in there to give you that motivation. So that will give you that dopamine hit. And then once you get round to start something, you want to feel focused and concentration, which is where we use an amino acid called acetylcarnitine. And that will boost your hyper focus, right? But if you really want to get shit done, being in a flow state is where it's at, right? So we go from dopamine to focus to a state of flow. And so we use a flower that was used by the Vikings before battle, rhodiola. So this was taken by the Vikings before battle hundreds of years ago to fortify themselves. And it's been used by either emergency room doctors in America to boost their learning whilst they haven't slept for 2 shifts, or elite cyclists in Belgium where it boosted their endurance. And what these do is that this works with the theanine to induce a flow state. So this will increase your alpha brainwaves. Now your alpha brainwaves are when you're in that state of, have you ever been doing something and 5 hours goes like that? You're in a state of flow. And the latest thing in Silicon Valley, after a study by McKinsey and Company, is that because you're 5 times more productive when you're in a state of flow, everyone wants to induce a state of flow now.
Yeah.
And that flow is a transition from high dopamine levels, motivation, to focus, to feeling in the zone is what flow really is. And that's how the coffee works. It's like a gentle thing. You're not going to feel like you've had Red Bull. You're just going to feel like you on a good day. It's getting into that state of being bothered to start, to feel focused, and then we use natural things to make sure there's no come down or no jitters or no problems like that.
It's I've been hearing this. Where did I hear, apart from you, about state of flow? I listened to a podcast recently. Okay, it was Steve Bartlett's one with Johnny Wilkinson.
Yeah.
He was talking about being in a state of flow. And when I got into sales again, there was the 3 kind of categories that you would be in. There was, I'm trying to remember now. You've got unconscious and not competent. You got conscious and not competent, and then it was you're unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
So you do something like a driving a car.
Yeah.
So like when you're trying to change gear, when you're first learning at 17, 18,
Yeah.
you're really thinking about, okay, this foot comes off the accelerator, this one goes down the clutch, this is how I move there, whilst looking at the road and while steering. And now you could do it and you could chat to your friend, turn off the radio, turn on the radio, turn over a channel. Some people obviously can't promote this, but smoke a cigarette or eat a burger or something as they drive along, and they could just do it with their eyes shut almost. And it's about getting into that state of unconsciously competent where you can just do the thing in boxing or having these conversations and it just flows, as you just said. That's where you become optimal and you become the most successful version of what you're trying to do at that
100%.
time.
So one of the joys I've got for people is you work with entrepreneurs like yourself. One common theme that will come out they all say is, although they're driven by money, they'll turn and say, do you know what the real key thing is for me, Gareth? It's time. I don't have enough time. So then I always say to them, well, if we can be in a flow state quicker or more of the time, how much is that worth to you? That's the value. You know what I mean? It's like, if this is where all the juice happens, this is where all the fucking great stuff, this is where it all goes down, do I want to leave to chance putting myself in that state? Or do I just want to drink Game On or take your coffee or just induce that state artificially by all means, yeah. And that's where all the latest tech is going with nootropics now. They're using tech and lights and flashing lights to induce this state. But that's going to take years to hit the ordinary man. But what we want to do is we want to get into an alpha brainwave state of flow, like particularly in your fighting. You know, when you're trying to force it or you're not in the mood and it just looks horrible, doesn't it? And you just can't get there. And there's times when it just comes. And how loose are you? You know, when you're not thinking about it. That's the value of a flow state.
Yeah. And it's like being on a telephone call, a sales call. Like you just suddenly come out with bars that you think, where did that come from? And it just made sense at that time. And the person resonates with it. And they go, oh, yeah, I want to do what you're saying. Or I want to buy into your products or to your service. And you're like, man, if I could be in that state all the time, I would be not just wealthier, but a lot more fulfilled because I'm giving these people value.
Yeah, of course. Well, that was so that's the value of our products, which is getting people. So, right, that's the optimal state. Our job at Honor is to get you there quicker, more often, because when you're not thinking about it and you just let it come, you've got it. You're all enough. You know, trust the training, trust the wisdom that you've gained along the way. Just release yourself from that. And unfortunately, because of the way we sleep or the way we eat or other extrinsic factors, we either stop ourselves getting there or we're too tired to get there or we're too buzzed out or we take too many stimulants to get into that flow state. But we all accept that the flow state is, you know, where it all happens. And like we said, you know, we're not on this planet long enough to take any chances about that. So if I can take something that I can get there quicker and it's gentle and it's good and I can do it again the following day, why won't we? And that's why it's so important.
Because I was having not a debate with my wife, but because we've spoke about this plenty of times. I've got a lot of friends who know a lot about nutrition and they're in, you know, I think I mentioned to you, I've got a friend of mine who used to be strength and condition nutritionist for David Hay, Amir Khan, Tiny Temper, etc. And he's given me a wealth of knowledge and then his affiliates give me a wealth of knowledge. And it's almost like, you know, trying to connect everything that makes sense for me and also my family. And I'm always learning, I'm always adapting, I'm always adding and dropping things out my day-to-day ritual and also my diet. And I don't know, PT said to her, oh, you should be taking more multivitamins. And I said, but remember that, and I wanted to get verification from you. Yeah. My understanding about multivitamins, I don't want to call it a scam because that might be the wrong way of saying it, but it's almost like, yes, they have got the certain things in the multivitamin that they're staying, hence why they can be a product. You have to have it in there. But your body doesn't recognize it. The amino acids, which act as a claw, and this is what Ruben used to say to me, if you get a Wellman's master pill, you know, multivitamin that comes into your body, it might have all these different vitamins in it. But the amino acid will look at it and go, this is foreign. This shouldn't be in my body. I don't recognise this. It won't grab it and absorb it, and therefore your body pisses it or shits it back out. Whereas if you take on natural ingredients, where it's got the whole makeup, it's whole food, it's whole, the amino acid recognises it, latches onto it and pulls it in and absorbs it. So these quick fixes of multivitamin or this or that, is actually not a quick fix, and it actually doesn't get recognised by the body. It doesn't get absorbed. So how much of that is true?
Bioavailability is very important. So I totally agree with, you know, whoever's giving you advice about multivitamins. It's bullshit, you know. So why you would start there is the point of which I need to supplement, because most multivitamins are rubbish. The dosage of whatever the dosage is of what they're trying to help with, I don't really understand. So a healthy diet trumps everything. And then what a healthy diet means to you, unfortunately, can depend on what sort of like religious sect you're with at the moment. Because the way people go on about keto and this and so on and so forth, you know, that's just another argument. But for me, there's no point taking a multivitamin. Get your diet absolutely dialed in, as healthy as you can. And then if you are going to supplement with something, it does come down to the bioavailability of those substances. So for instance, and then it's also taking a holistic view. So we have an immunity product that we won't put out there anything unless it's the best of its kind, okay? So we have a Battle On product. Now what we do is we make sure everything is strong enough and is compelling to make a difference, and it's backed up with all the science studies. So it has not only the strength, but the bioavailability to give people of what they're searching for, right? But if you're going to take something to help with immunity, you've got to lower your stress levels, because it's like filling up a bucket with a hole in it. So trying to help your immunity or take an immunity product that doesn't address stress or doesn't lower stress is pointless, because stress is going to be the biggest factor to compromise your T cells, your white cells, to build up a healthy immune system, which is why we have ashwagandha that's been used for Indian society. It's an Vedic herb. It's been used for thousands of years. And what this will do is naturally drop your cortisol levels, lower that flight response. So we put that in our immunity product. So therefore, if you're wanting high levels of vitamin D and high levels of zinc and magnesium and so on and so forth, and vitamin C, firstly, we want the most bioavailable versions of those. But then also we want to do something that lowers the cortisol to make sure that your immunity system is, basically enhanced, because you can't have one without the other. It's like, sleep is so important, so important. But most sleep products, they're worthless, because you can't absorb some of the stuff that's in them. Some of the stuff, like valerian or hops that's used in natural sleep products, they need to be taken at lunchtime for them to work. And yet people put them in, and that's why people feel groggy first thing in the morning. The way that is metabolized by the body, for that to work for sleep, you would have to take that by lunchtime.
Yeah. I think I mentioned to you, and I've said this on the podcast a few times, I read a few books. One was called Headstrong by David Asprey. Yep. And he was one of the first people that I picked up on about coffee and certain life hacks, and even with the glasses over there that I use
the blue blockers,
And I found it very, very insightful. And what really excites me, and I don't always act in accordance to this goal, but I really should as I'm getting older, is when he said the human body shouldn't die at the age of 75, 80, 90 years of age. In actual fact, he's got a goal to reach something specific like 147, 148 years of age. And he said, with the knowledge that is coming out now, we could live until we're 200. I think actually someone in Cambridge or Oxford said that a baby being born today will be able to live up until they're over 1,000 years of age, due to the knowledge and also the teachings which are coming out today. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but even if you did get to the 120, 130, 140, 150 years of age, you're talking about doubling your lifespan, which is fucking exciting. And it's not just about surviving, but then being this old, decrepit person. It's about surviving, but thriving in that time period.
That's the crucial thing.
And living this extra life. And that, for me, should go hand in hand, and it will go hand in hand with like becoming financially well off. I want to be financially well off, but also have this very fulfilled life where I'm very, I'm very healthy.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you said a really, really, really interesting point. Most people about longevity or health or wellness, you've kind of like, this is sort of not in tune with, which is, it's not about suspending morbidity. It's not about putting off death, right? It's about living life to the fullest and the healthiest. So like you said, you can live till 120, 140 of things. However, it's just, just prolonging death is pointless. So being you as fit as you can be. So for instance, you're 70, you're 80, but you feel like you're 50. That's where the fun is. So that's the opportunity now. And that goes in hand in glove with your diet, your exercise, your mental health as well. And also the hacks that we give people to make sure your inflammation, so the amount of inflammation in your body will directly correspond to how quickly you age. So what you want to do is if this is a passion of yours, is I want to make sure I zero down inflammation as much as I can, because where I'm inflamed, I'm aging. And as much as I can stop inflammation, I almost can turn back the clock. And there are key things to do that. So sleep is one of those things where I'm going to regenerate. So I've got two things I've got to be mindful of. I've got to cut down the inflammation as much as I can, and I've got to regenerate as much as I can. And that should be the goal of everybody, for exactly the right reasons that you said, which is because I can be here longer, having more fun with my family. That's the goal. It's not to hold off death, but those are the two pathways through. And science is giving us more and more reasons for us to be able to reduce inflammation and also to make sure that we dial in our sleep. I mean, sleep is one of the crucial areas for people that they really struggle. And they chase it through painkillers, from sleep aids, from sleep pills or prescription sleeping pills. And unfortunately, those will not work. Those were only ever created and invented for a short-term fix. But what you do eventually is you shut down the inner pathways of teaching your body how to do that. And then they're also really linked to weight gain, because they start to get associated with this real bursts of hunger in the night and everything. So we should be teaching people really good behaviors and practice, as well as everything else, to make sure that we get the best sleep that we can.
And I've got to tell you, I think it's where I'm getting older and I'm a little bit more sensitive to what I'm putting in my body and what I'm experiencing, and plus my own self-education. I'll give you one example. So my second son, Logan, was born in September last year. So what's 7 months, okay? And I went into the spare bedroom because my wife does breastfeeding, and he's obviously learning his patterns. Waking up in the middle of the night. Obviously got a business to run and podcasts, etc. And what I learned about it, going into that spare room, and now I'm gradually coming back into my bedroom with my wife. I'm actually realising that going back into that room, I'm not actually having the best night's sleep, and I'll tell you why. When I was going into the other room, I'm quite a hot person. Yeah. So I was turning off all the radiators and the room is actually freezing. But I love sleeping in that condition.
Yeah, men do.
So I put on the cover. So I know it's cold, but when you put the cover on, I'm warm, but the air is cold. Yeah. And I make sure it's completely pitch black, because even David Asprey, again, listening to some of his stuff in the book, and I look at some of his stuff on these podcasts and stuff, he said even a small bit of light can disturb your sleep. Have it absolutely pitch black. And then obviously there isn't my wife next to me. Then I don't have the baby monitor where Logan's voice is coming through occasionally. It's just complete silence. And when I get up the next day, I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. Yeah. Like, even if I have less sleep, it's better quality sleep. Yeah. And I'm getting up. Now going back into her room, she liked it a bit warmer. Yeah. And what I started thinking, I kept on like small little witches on my arm and stuff. And what I've worked it out to be over time is where the room is a little bit hotter, I slightly sweat a bit more. And as the sweat is coming out, it's creating a bit of an itch. Like I'm like, like a little fidget sort of thing. Yeah. Then she's got the baby monitor on. There's a little bit of light. Then I can occasionally hear it. And I'm tell you what, the quality sleep I get from staying in my room or back into my normal room, it has been completely different. Yeah. And I've realised that small experiment that I'd done because my son was born, it massively changes the course of my day because of the sleep.
Environment's so important. So I mean, we've got a sleep product, but before I say to anyone, before you go near our sleep product, right, go and have a look at our free hacks for sleep, right? Because we want to make a difference, right? And environment is so important, in terms of the darkened room, all the lights out, all that kind of thing. The most important thing, your eyes. And that's because of the actual receptors for blue light, and part of your brain is actually housed in your eyes, right? But you've mentioned a really important point about temperature. So men are slightly different to women. There is a physiological difference between the sexes about the best temperature to sleep at, right? Which is why couples are usually don't enjoy the same thing, because there's a difference between the sexes. Now, one of the things that happens is if you can drop core temperature by 1 degree, right? If you can drop core temperature by 1 degree, it will almost work like a tranquilizer. So that's one of the things in terms of like having a hot bath and then getting your legs higher than your heart. That's how it works. Because when you have that hot bath, right, the heat will rush to the skin and it will take away from the core temperature. That core temperature dropping and then you going into a cold room will enhance your sleep, right? Then if you put that with your legs being higher than your heart, and starting to control your breathing, which will drop your cortisol, that will all help your time to fall asleep. So people usually struggle in two areas, either getting to sleep or being woken up. So those are the behavior things that you can do in terms of following certain rituals to get yourself to drop off to sleep. Don't get into bed and try and feel relaxed. You need to have dropped your cortisol, done something relaxing, in some kind of practice just for 15 minutes, not directly before you go to bed, just some part in the evening. You need to almost drop the cortisol out of your body. So some kind of breathing techniques, whatever works for you. Sit and contemplate the book. Do something with your core temperature, darkened room, all good stuff. And then being woken up in the middle of the night comes down to three things usually, which is your liver is compromised. So if you used to drink a lot like me, that's going to be one of the things. So making sure your liver is healthy is something you can do. A spike of insulin, which happens with a lot of people. So I know it's one of the mistakes people make is if they're really active or they go to the gym and they've usually seen some people giving advice about carbs. So no carbs before bed. It's the worst thing you can do because you actually want carbs at night because they will help you release tryptophan. And then that's where you're going to recover. And also your carbs don't suddenly have a magic watch in terms of like, oh, well, it's past 6 o'clock. Let's get on the hips. It's bullshit. So when I advise women and go, oh, I don't want any carbs before bed, I'm like, no, take your carbs out during the day. If you're active, go on fats and protein. Mentally, that's better because carbs make you feel sleepier. And then backload your carbs in the evening to release that tryptophan, to release your melatonin, and to make you feel full, but also to stop you getting this insulin spike in the middle of the night, which is going to wake you up. You don't want disturbed sleep. You're going to feel rotten. And then, because that's just going to increase your cortisol, which means you won't lose weight. And then the other thing is a cortisol spike as well, when you get that stress feeling, that anxious feeling. And then once again, is you've got to drop as much cortisol out of the body as you can before you go to sleep. So understanding that if I'm having sleepless nights or disturbed nights, there's three things that I can focus on in the body to repair that will help me. Like I think I meant sending your message to you. Having a diet that's high in potassium and carbs in the evening is what I work with fighters. And salt as well. One of the misunderstood minerals on the planet is salt. Salt is so important to the body. And yet we've been told by doctors and gurus over the years, oh, salt's really bad. It makes you high blood pressure and all that kind of thing. What a load of nonsense. That just came by Big Pharma in America trying to sell these, blood pressure drugs. Salt is one of the most important minerals of the body. Pink Himalayan ionized salt is so important for a functioning thyroid. And when you're fighting, if you're not having enough salt, this sensation where you get, if you ever get that feeling where I've run out of carbs, I feel so depleted. What they found out now in university studies is that a need for salt hits the body quicker than carb depletion. So what you think of carb depletion as in I'm running out of gas is actually you running out of salt. So one of the things I want to try for you for sparring for tomorrow is get pink Himalayan salt, have that before you do your exercise, and I bet you've got more gas tank. And that's one of the things that you work with fighters is that's how important it is to the body, because if you don't have that before you go to sleep, your body will reach out to it because it's so important. And if it can't find it, it will ratchet up cortisol to wake you up to say, we haven't got it. And that's one of the things, that you can help to boost your performance.
So bar like the coffee and obviously the sleep aids and things like that. What else does your brand on to do? What is it that your actual company does for your clients?
So we have natural nootropics. So it all came about for the Genius Coffee was the first thing that we introduced it, and that was something to increase brain health, focus, concentration, learning, and memory. And we had a range of drinks out that did that, and then we took that into a stronger version, which is the Game On. And what that will do is it's natural substances from the four corners of the world that will increase your mental capacity, but also brain health. Because there's lots of things that you can take, but a lot of them aren't very good for taking every day or to protect your brain. So we boost performance as well as increasing your brain. So one of the things that we use is from a tree in China called ginkgo biloba. Now this was used in one of the first medical books in 1 BC. So we use things that have been around for thousands of years. How these people knew that this would fortify your brain, and it increases the blood flow through your brain. And then what it works is synergistically with everything else that we put in the coffee and the game on, there is a synergistic effect. So almost 2 and 2 equals 7. And that's how we formulate things, which took me years to create the perfect formulas, because you want to get it just right for almost it to appear like, I'm not sure if it's working, but I've had an amazing day. For us, that's perfect. And so we have an immunity product as well, and sleep. And that's where we started. And the next things will start to drive into the rest of the things that we've created, the magical products that we've created over years. And we've got 10 things sitting on the shelf now.
Lovely. So what's your ambition, Gareth, in the next coming years? I mean, what's not the end result, but what are the milestones you're going to hit during the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
The overall goal for the company is to help 1 million people optimize their lives. So our goal is a beneficial one. It's a purpose-driven one rather than a financial one. So for me, that is the goal, to make an impact, to make a difference. So, for me, the ambition for the company is to make an impact on the world, which sounds wonderful. But if you're my business partner, it's probably the most frustrating thing in the world, because I'm driven by different things. One of the interesting things is, through the honour journey, is how often I've failed. So we talked about this earlier. So I had 10 years of failing to get this coffee right from my kitchen with my daughter. And from being someone that was very ego-driven before, and all my fragility that, couldn't face failure, I had to embrace failure on a way that I'd never done before. And then the journey for us as a business is then, once we got these products out, what's been so inspiring meeting with you today is then the whole world of social media and becoming e-commerce, and then taking our brand out there in a far better way. And what I found is it's done, mate, is it's just revealed what business does. It reveals your almost your strengths, but also your failings as a person. So, one of the things about the business is to take it onto a far greater level. But the realization is you'll only perform at how you perform as a person. Business is a great mirror, isn't it? I'm sure you're finding this right now. It's a great mirror about what you're great at and what you're terrible at. And it's like, do you surround yourself with people who make up for your failings? Which I'm very fortunate to, that, I've got business partners who have complementary skills, and you want to surround yourself with people like that rather than think you're king of everything, because I'm certainly not. And then also just how you might want to go into this world and make a change and make a difference. But if it's not making commercial sense and viable sense, and as much as you want to make a difference on the world, there is a way to go about it in the right way. So to drive it to being sustainable, but across the States, I think has always been my appetite, is always to take the products to the States in a full range, in a full complement.
It's good. So no doubt people are going to want to know where to find you, follow your journey, buy your product, see what else is going to be happening in the future. So where could that be, Gareth?
Well, they reach us online, honalife.com. Visit us on Instagram, honalife, and then also always visit my page at The Genius Coffee Guy on Instagram.
Good stuff.
And because for someone who hadn't even touched Facebook until they were about 45, that world is just alien to me, man. So yeah, that's been part of the journey.
We can definitely do a part 2 in the future, because there's so much more I do want to ask you. But I just feel if we do a bite size now, and then later on, once you hit another milestone and I hit a different milestone, I guess both of our worlds can come back together and we can do a part 2. That would be great.
I'd love that, because as you noticed from when we met today, I mean, I just hammered you with questions because, I am so driven to inspire. I think to do that, you've got to be open to being inspired, and just your willingness to just be so brave about what you're fucking doing. Mate, don't fucking stop that, because fucking more power to you. It's incredible.
Yeah, thank you, mate. All right. Well, look, if you enjoyed the episodes, please subscribe, follow Gareth and also his brand Honor. Share this podcast episode and YouTube episode with your friend, family. And always remember to be happy, never content. I'm going to ask you, Gareth. I come up with my slogan, which is be happy, never content, because when I started my first company, which I mentioned in sales, it was to get into the minds of the salespeople to deliver, hit targets, and to become the best version of themselves. Now, I've got my own interpretation of what be happy, never content means to me. But if I were to ask the founder of Honor, Gareth Jones, what does be happy, never content mean to you?
Be happy, never content. So I think you have an honour and a commitment to those that you share your life with, to be purpose-driven, to be everything that you can possibly be. So happiness is in reaching full potential and paying it back. So I think be committed to being the best that you can, like a badge of honour, to pay those around you that you share your life with, that you're being everything you can. Like you said before, you want to be on this planet a long time. Do it in the right way.
Definitely. Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for your time, and be happy, never content, everybody. Thank you.